Part 20. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, Past and Present. Chapter 191. Chapter 191 Victory. Ashinage's status in the Turks is somewhat embarrassing. I heard that Ashinaju's biological mother was once the concubine of Yuhwalan Khan's father. Later Ashina Yuhwalan killed his father to seize the throne and married Ashinaju's biological mother as his wife. After giving birth to Ashinaju, the Khan's wife cut her wrists and committed suicide. Yuhwalan Khan naturally had feelings for his wife, so he blamed Ashinaju for his wife's death. In the eyes of the Turks, Ashinaju is only the eldest prince in name. When it comes to strength and prestige, the second prince Ashina Yang is naturally more respected. At this time, in Ashina Yang's tent, he covered his abdomen with a gloomy expression. I underestimated Xiao Shenjiao. I didn't expect him to be so strong after being hit by an arrow. The spear almost skewered him in half. Second prince, don't be angry. The arrow is poisoned. I'm afraid Xiao Shenjiao won't survive tonight. The waiter on the side said. Hearing this, Ashina Yang's face became a little brighter. Xiao Shenjiao is nothing more than that. If I had known that the other party was so useless, why would I join forces with that guy Xiao Jin? What the second prince said is that Xiao Shenjiao and Xiao Jin are no match for you. The second prince, however, there are many people in the Dacian dynasty, so it would be nice if we could lose less people. The chamberlain is very good at talking, and the second prince's mood is getting better and better. At this moment, a person from outside ran in quickly. Second prince, there's a letter from over there. How is Xiao Shenjiao? The chamberlain quickly tore open the envelope and read every word, with a look of joy on his face. Go back to the second prince, the matter should be settled, we can send out troops tomorrow. Show it to me, the prince. Ashina Yang took the letter, read it at a glance, and then laughed. Very good, order to go down. Tomorrow the army will attack in one fell swoop, catching them off guard. His smile was so big that he accidentally pulled a wound, and even grinning could not stop his joy. The Turks and the Dacian dynasty fought countless battles with each other. Although there were draws, they never really won. If he wins this battle, he will be the one to succeed in the future. The sky has not yet fully dawned, and the Turkic soldiers are already ready to go. Ashina Yang was injured and did not ride a horse. Instead, he sat on the horse frame and followed behind. Today's battle will be won by us. Win! Win! With the shouts, the Turkic soldiers set off. But what they didn't know was that a fierce battle would be waiting for them ahead. It was very quiet on the mountain road, only the sound of footsteps and horse hooves could be heard. The Turkic soldiers crossed the path cautiously and were about to walk out. There was a strong wind blowing in the face. There were loud sounds all around. Is the sound of a trumpet? There's an ambush ahead. The Turkic soldiers were immediately in chaos, but they were well trained and quickly maintained their formation under their leadership. It's just that the soldiers of Dacian dynasty did not give them extra time. Boulders rolled down and rockets fell. The dust flew up and covered the blood. Ashina Yang was at the back of the team and his heart tightened when he saw the movement not far away. How could there be an ambush? Since Xiao Shenjiao is dead, will the soldiers from the Dacian dynasty still have time to ambush him? Seeing the numerous casualties among the Turkic soldiers, Ashina Yang quickly ordered, get back quickly. But it's too late. A horse gallops down. The person sitting immediately is Suye. Ashina Yang was even more shocked when he saw Suye. How could it be Suye? Isn't he dead? No one had time to answer his question. The two armies fought, and the side that struck first firmly held the advantage. Soon, reinforcements arrived. Suye pulled the horse back and was met by Sun Malayang. Uncle! It's good that you're fine. Sun Malayang looked at the somewhat thin Suye and said in a deep voice. Soon, the uncle and nephew joined forces to kill the remaining Turkic soldiers. Ashina Yang was injured and could not run fast, so he was naturally caught. On the way back to the military camp, Ashina Yang was still shouting loudly. He was not afraid of being caught, and was even a little proud. Until Xiao Shenjiao stood in front of him. Ashina Yang's proud expression froze. "You, how are you still alive? It is impossible for anyone except their royal family to have the antidote to that secret medicine. Xiao Shenjiao should be dead. Lock him up first. I think Yu Hualin will be happy to pay the price to redeem him." Xiao Shenjiao didn't look at Ashina Yang, his eyes passed over him lightly. Such indifference made Ashina Yang excited. "Xiao Shenjiao, you can't be alive. You should be dead." Until he was pressed down, Ashina Yang's heart-rending shouts could still be heard. Xiao Shenjiao looked at Suya and looked him up and down. "I've lost some weight. The food in that place is not very good." Suya scratched his head. His temper was still the same as before, but his eyes were a little more settled. He can be regarded as having walked away from the gate of hell. "You've worked hard today, everyone, go and have a rest." Xiao Shenjiao nodded slightly to everyone. The soldiers cheered and left one by one with haggard faces. Although it was a victorious battle, casualties were inevitable. Suya rubbed his chest and turned back to the camp. After a while, Sun Malayang came in. "Uncle." Seeing Sun Malayang, Suya sat down and stood up again. "Sit down, I just have something to ask you." "Uncle, if you want to ask about your mother and sister, you should wait until you return to Beijing and ask in person. You are quite clever, kid." Sun Malayang did come to ask about Sulayun. After all, how could he, as an uncle, not be concerned about the real or fake gift of 1,000 pieces of gold? If he hadn't had to guard the border, as soon as he heard about this, he should have gone to Jingzhou himself and taught the family named Li a lesson. "How dare you replace their niece?" Not only did they replace it, but they also took good care of it. Sun Malayang became very angry when he thought about it. Suya looked at the aggressive second uncle and smiled helplessly. "Fortunately, my second uncle is not in the capital, otherwise my sister would be famous in the capital when she returns to the capital." On the way back to Beijing, two inconspicuous carriages were driving on the road. "Mom, are we almost arriving in the capital?" A childish voice sounded in the carriage. The curtain was lifted, and a small head was exposed. Sun Yuxuan looked around curiously. This was the first time he had returned to the capital since his birth. Qin Zian looked at her son with a smile on her face. "Yes, I will see my grandfather soon." "Is Xiaoxian happy?" "Of course I'm happy, there are also aunt and cousin, my uncle is here too." Sun Yuxuan counted people on his fingers, with uncontrollable joy in his eyes. Seeing her son like this, Qin Zian felt a little guilty because she didn't think about Xiaoxian and took him to stay in the northwest for 5 years. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 192. Chapter 192 The Strange Girl. "Mom, there's someone over there." Sun Yuxuan looked outside the carriage and pointed towards it. A figure could be vaguely seen under the big tree not far away. Qin Zian glanced at it for a few times and frowned. "Stop." The driver pulled the reins. "Madam, what's the matter?" "Go and see what's going on under the tree over there." The carriage behind also stopped, and a man dressed in coarse cloth stepped forward. Seeing the man coming up, the coachman got out of the carriage and walked to the big tree. Soon, the coachman shouted, "Someone has fainted here. You look at the young master, I'll go take a look." Qin Zian ordered the man to get up and get out of the carriage and walk towards the big tree. The person who fainted under the tree was a man wearing cyan men's clothing with dirty cheeks. Qin Zian raised his eyes and looked at the capital city not far away. "Let's put people on the carriage." This is not far from the capital, so I can help her as much as I can. The unconscious man was carried into the carriage behind. The carriage started rocking. Slowly walked towards the capital. Soon, we arrived at the city gate. The driver dismounted and handed over the ultimatum, and the two carriages drove into the capital. The weather is getting warmer and there are more pedestrians on the street. Sun Yuxuan leaned against the window, looking at this place that was particularly new to him. "Madam, shall we go back to Sun Mansion first?" Qin Zian thought for a while. She hadn't been back for many years, and she probably didn't know where the street was. "Let's go back to Sun's house first." "Okay." At the entrance of Sun Mansion, two carriages stopped. Sun Yuxuan couldn't wait to get out of the car. As soon as the carriage stopped, he opened the curtain and jumped out. Qin Zian didn't have time to catch him. Fortunately, Sun Yuxuan grew up in the border area, so nothing would happen to him at such a height. "Xiaoxian, have you forgotten what mother told you? Don't be in such a hurry." "Mom, hurry up." Sun Yuxuan looked at the mansion in front of him, but he still remembered Qin Zian's instructions. Running forward excitedly. "It's just that I'm small, and I can't reach the door knocker even if I jump." Looking at Sun Yuxuan jumping up and down, Qin Zian couldn't help laughing. "Mom, come and help Xiaoxian." Sun Yuxuan also knew that he could not reach it, so he quickly turned back to seek help from Qin Zian. Qin Zian then stepped forward, pulled the door knocker, and knocked. Soon someone came to open the door. Seeing Qin Zian, the doorman was stunned for a moment. "Who are you?" He vaguely felt that the other person looked familiar, but he couldn't remember who it was. Just as Qin Zian was about to speak, the janitor lowered his head and met Sun Yuxuan's face. The next moment, he suddenly raised his head and looked at Qin Zian. "Second madam." Qin Zian smiled and nodded to the gatekeeper. Sun Yuxuan looks very much like Sun Malayang, so seeing him revived the janitor's memory. "Second madam, you are finally back." Steward Lao Yang led Qin Zian and Sun Yuxuan to the main hall. As soon as they arrived at the main hall, Sun Gro also arrived. "Second sister-in-law." Seeing Qin Zian, Sun Gro stepped forward to say hello. Although Qin Zian was confused about why Sun Gro was at the house, she didn't show it. She pulled Sun Yuxuan over and said, "Xiaoxian, call your aunt quickly." "Hello, aunt." Sun Yuxuan shouted sweetly, and Sun Gro's heart instantly melted when she looked at her nephew who was exactly the same as his brother. Sun Xiao and Sun Changping also arrived. "Daughter-in-law, please send greetings to your father." Qin Zian stepped forward, bowed politely, and said to Sun Changping, "Brother, is it safe on the way back? Did anything happen?" Qin Zian shook his head. "Malayang arranged for someone to take us back, and there was nothing wrong along the way. But before entering the capital, I met a comatose man on the road, so I brought him back. Lao Yang had already sent someone to ask a doctor to see him. Saw it?" After saying that, she pulled Sun Yuxuan over and said, "Xiaoxian, this is my grandfather and this is my uncle." "Hello grandpa, hello uncle." Xiaoxian has grown so big in the blink of an eye. When Sun Yuxuan was just born, Sun Changping went to the northwest and held the child. And it was the first time for Sun Xiao to meet his grandson. "Grandpa and grandson, you look at me and I look at you, big eyes staring at small eyes, the scene is a bit funny. This kid looks like Malayang." After a while, Sun Xiao held back a sentence. There was a bit of exclamation in his tone. "Qin Zian, not only do they look similar, but they also have similar temperaments. They are in a state of turmoil all day long, and there is no definite conclusion. Children are all like this, and Xiaoxian looks smart." Sun Gro rubbed Sun Yuxuan's head and said, "Auntie is right." Hearing someone speaking for him, Sun Yuxuan quickly responded, "You must know that when we were in the northwest, even my father was on my mother's side? Qin Zian glanced at Yuxuan's son helplessly. Are you happy that your aunt is helping you? Sun Yuxuan turned around and hugged Sun Jiao's legs, with a smile on his face. The main hall was very lively. Over the guest room, Lao Yang led the doctor into the room. But as soon as he entered the door, a gust of wind blew from the side. With quick eyes and quick hands, Lao Yang grabbed the doctor and avoided him. The other party was stunned and looked at Lao Yang in surprise. Have you practiced before? Lao Yang was even more surprised than the other party. He looked up and down. Are you a girl? Although the other party is wearing men's clothing, her voice is completely that of a girl. What, can't a girl dress like this? Sidhu Dankai curled his lips and sat down on the chair. She could see that the person in front of her had no ill intentions toward her. It's not impossible. Lao Yang looked at the energetic girl and considered, you fainted on the road earlier. My second wife saw you and brought you back. Do you feel uncomfortable? Do you want the doctor to take a look? Oh, no need. As soon as he finished speaking, a grunting sound was heard. Sidhu Dankai covered his stomach and looked a little embarrassed. At this time, Lao Yang understood clearly. He was probably so hungry that he fainted on the way. Wait a moment, I'll ask the kitchen to make some food for you. Lao Yang left with the doctor and ordered his servants to get some sets of women's clothes. Sulayun learned that Qin Zian and Sun Yuxuan were back, so he hurried to the Sun mansion. Before anyone reached the main hall, a person walked towards me. Hey, I finally saw someone. She was clearly wearing men's clothing, but the voice coming from the other party was a woman's. Sidhu Dankai hurriedly stepped forward. Where does this gate go? Who are you? Liangzin and Kuliu stopped in front of Sulayun and asked. Sulayun looked at the other person's Adam's apple, and sure enough, there was no bulge. Is a woman. I'm just asking for directions. Do I still need to tell you your name? It's not necessary if you are outside, but this is the Sun family. You don't seem to be the Sun family. Why are you here? Little miss. The housekeeper, Lao Yang, ran over when he heard the commotion and explained, this girl fainted on the road. The second lady saw her when she came back and brought her back. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 193. Chapter 193. Eat all. After Lao Yang finished explaining, he looked at Sidhu Dankai again and muttered in his heart, why is this girl still wearing men's clothes? Sidhu Dankai nodded and agreed, speaking of which, I haven't thanked my benefactor yet. Please take me there. Sulayun and Lao Yang looked at each other, and the latter stepped aside and said, this way, please. Several people walked towards the main hall. As we approached, we could already hear the lively sounds in the main hall. Sulayun's steps were a little faster. As soon as he entered the main hall, he saw Sun Yuxuan leaning next to Sun Jiao, and Sulayun couldn't help but blush. It's Yunur here, Xiaoxian, that's your cousin Yunur. Sun Jiao saw Sulayun's figure, reached out and pushed Sun Yuxuan to signal. Sun Yuxuan quickly looked back, his eyes lit up, and he ran to Sulayun in a few steps. Hello, cousin. Hello, Xiaoxian. Sulayun held back tears and knelt down to look at Yuxuan's son. Something happened to the Sun family, and the second aunt entrusted Xiaoxian to her, but she failed to protect Xiaoxian well. It's because she is incompetent. Cousin, why are you crying? Sun Yuxuan reached out and wiped away the tears from the corners of Sulayun's eyes. Sulayun then realized that she still couldn't hold back her tears. She quickly raised her hand and rubbed the corners of her eyes. Maybe the sand got into her eyes. Even Sulayun himself didn't believe the sentence. But Sun Yuxuan nodded. Xiaoxian knows that feeling. When he was in the northwest, Xiaoxian often had sand getting into his eyes. Childish words made Sulayun laugh. Then will Xiaoxian cry like my sister? Of course not. Xiaoxian is a boy. Daddy said, a man should never shed tears easily. When Sun Yuxuan said this, he subconsciously puffed up his chest. This appearance made everyone present laugh. Even Sidhu Dankai showed a smile. Qinzian noticed Sidhu Dankai and said, Master, are you awake? Sidhu Dankai suppressed his smile and coughed slightly. Well, I wonder who saved me on the way. Are you a girl? Qinzian was stunned and a little annoyed. If she knew that the other party was a girl, she would not leave her in the carriage behind, which was full of men. Although the other party didn't know it, she always felt a little bit sorry. Sorry, I saw you were wearing men's clothes and thought you were a man, so I had someone carry you to the carriage behind and let you stay with a few men. It's okay, Sidhu Dankai waved his hand, I've been dealing with men a lot, so don't take it to heart not to mention you saved my life. Speaking of this, Sidhu Dankai's cheeks turned slightly red. After all, being hungry and fainting on the road is really not something worth talking about. Had she not been in a hurry and forgotten to bring her purse, she wouldn't have fainted from hunger on the road. You're fine, but do you need someone to take you home? Qinzian nodded. Hearing this, Sidhu Dankai was stunned for a moment. She had no money and couldn't stay in an inn. She didn't even bring her palace card. Even if she went to the palace, she would probably be stopped outside. For a moment, she didn't know where she should go. Qinzian saw her dilemma and asked, Is there any inconvenience? My home is not in the capital. I came to the capital for fun. But I met a thief on the road. My wallet and everything were stolen. Now I don't even have money to stay in an inn. Sidhu Dankai pursed his lips and said. She looked at the people and asked sheepishly, Can you lend me some money? I promise to return it to you. Of course it's possible. Qinzian said, took out the purse from her arms, stepped forward and handed it to Sidhu Dankai. There are about a dozen taels of silver in it, which is enough to stay in an inn. It's just that if Sidhu Dankai wants to have a good time in the capital, he may not have enough money. Sidhu Dankai didn't feel any less, but looked at Qinzian a few more times. She didn't expect that she would see such a kind-hearted person for the first time in the capital. She curled her lips as she thought about what her family had told her before coming out. Who said that everyone in the capital can eat people? There are still good people. Don't worry, I'll pay you back as soon as I have the money. Sidhu Dankai's words are conclusive. After sending Buddha to the west, Lao Yang arranged for someone to take Sidhu Dankai to the inn. At this time, the sky was gradually getting dark, and it was time to have dinner. The family sits around the table. With Justin's son, the dinner table is particularly lively. Mom, I want to eat that. Looking at the dishes on the table, Sun Yuxuan wanted to eat every one of them. He had never eaten these when he was in the northwest. Qinzian pointed to the already full rice bowl in front of him. Your bowl is piled into a mountain, can you finish it? Of course I've finished eating. Sun Yuxuan finished speaking and started eating. In a short time, he actually ate most of it. But after all, a child of 5 or 6 years old can eat as much as he wants. After eating more than half of it, the feeling of fullness also rises. But looking at the dishes on the dinner table, the expectation in Sun Yuxuan's eyes was not less. Xiaoxian, what did mother teach you? You said not to waste food. Sun Yuxuan looked back, looking a little pitiful for some reason. Sulayun realized something and said, Xiaoxian, let's eat these tomorrow, okay? Hearing this, Sun Yuxuan's eyes lit up and he looked at Sulayun expectantly. Sister Yunur, can we eat these tomorrow? Of course, Xiaoxian will have plenty of opportunities to eat whatever he wants to eat later. But now, Xiaoxian has to eat all the food in his bowl first. Yeah, Xiaoxian won't waste it? Sun Yuxuan's eyes no longer fell on those dishes, and Qin Zian suddenly reacted. Xiaoxian didn't really want to eat those dishes, but he seemed to be worried that after finishing this meal, he would not have the chance to eat the next meal. Qin Zian's heart twitched. In the past 5 years in the Northwest, it has been difficult for them to be adults, let alone Xiaoxian. Second aunt, please eat more. You don't even know that, knowing that you and Xiaoxian are coming back, my mother has already ordered the kitchen to prepare meals. These dishes are all the freshest. Sulayun laughed. Qin Zian responded softly, and the sadness dissipated. Now that she is back in the capital, she will make up for Xiaoxian well. After the meal, the family was still chatting at the dinner table. I saw a maid running in a panic. General Sun, something happened to the lady. It is the maidservant beside Zhang Susu, Lotus. Hearing this, Sun Changping stood up suddenly, his expression changed drastically. What happened? He Hua panted and said hurriedly, when I just came back, the lady wanted to buy some things, but in a blink of an eye, the slave disappeared. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 194. Chapter 194. We meet again. Sun Changping didn't care about anyone else. Before He Hua finished speaking, he ran out. General Sun, please wait for me, slave. Upon seeing this, Lotus quickly followed. Lao Yang, bring a few people to help. Sun Xiao's orders arrived. Lao Yang hurriedly agreed and left in a hurry. At the dinner table, Qin Zian looked puzzled. Who is that lady? Sun Gro still had worry on her face as she explained, when my eldest brother came back, he rescued a girl named Zhang Susu on the road. She is now living in our house. It's a coincidence, how come my eldest brother and I both saved a girl? Qin Zian said, observing Sun Gro's expression, and was a little curious. What do eldest brother and Miss Zhang Susu have? It's hard to say. Let's wait until they come back to explain it to you. Sun Gro shook her head. How come such a good person is missing? Sulayun rolled his eyes and remembered something. In her previous life, it seems that Zhang Susu also had an accident, but that accident also brought her and her uncle together. Perhaps today? In Situ Dankai yawned after eating and drinking. At the end of the day, I was about to fall asleep, but I heard a small sound. Her ears twitched and she leaned toward the bed. A woman's voice could be heard faintly next door, also accompanied by the man's disgusting laughter. Situ Dankai's face turned cold. He got out of bed in a few steps, pushed open the door, and walked to the next door. His fist knocked on the door several times. I remembered the rustling sound, and soon, a man shouted, "Who is it? Open the door." Situ Dankai did not answer, but kept knocking on the door. Before anyone in the house came to look at the door, 2 men dressed as servants ran up. "What are you doing? Go away." Obviously, these 2 boys are each other's subordinates. Situ Dankai said with a cold face, "Hurry up and open the door." "Who are you? Why are you meddling in your own business?" the boy asked. After that, he stared at Situ Dankai for a few times and said, "A girl is wearing a man's clothes. Does she really think of herself as a hero?" Perhaps he was annoyed, and someone opened the door from the inside. A fat man with big ears looked at Situ Dankai holding a belt. "Why are you making such a fuss? Get away." Situ Dankai laughed angrily. "What are you doing in the house? Yo, still a girl? What, do you want to join too?" Hearing the sound, a lewd smile appeared on the man's face. "Join, okay." Situ Dankai snorted coldly, stretched out his fist and hit the opponent's oily face hard. "Ah!" The man's scream passed through the wall and spread outside. Sun Changping paused, and he and He Hua just arrived at the place where Zhang Susu disappeared. "General Sun." He Hua didn't hear the sound and didn't understand why Sun Changping stopped. Sun Changping looked at the inn not far away and frowned, "Go in and take a look." Instinct told him that Susu might be inside. Running into the inn, the second floor was already in a state of chaos. The man was punched and his nose was bleeding. He covered his nose and said angrily, "Catch her." Two young boys chased Sidhu Dankai, but their skills were not as good as Sidhu Dankai's. Instead, he was slipped away by Sidhu Dankai. The guests who heard the commotion stuck their heads out to watch, and cheered for Sidhu Dankai from time to time. "Is her?" Sun Changping recognized Sidhu Dankai and saw that she was very agile and seemed to have no need for help. He looked around, but did not see Jiang Susu's figure. Lao Yang also arrived with his people. Seeing the scene in front of him, he asked, "Master, do you want to go up and help?" "Well, I'll go find Susu somewhere else." Sun Changping thought his intuition was wrong and was about to turn around and leave. He Hua suddenly pointed at the man with a bleeding nose at the door. "General, I recognize him, he is a friend of the lady's friend." Sun Changping paused and looked past the door. His brows furrowed. He didn't think this was a coincidence. With a turn of his feet, Sun Changping walked towards the man. "Step aside." The man saw Sun Changping. Although he didn't know who the other person was, the coldness around Sun Changping made his legs tremble and he subconsciously stepped aside. Through the gap, Sun Changping saw another figure on the bed in the room. His eyes flashed and he recognized the clothes. "Lao Yang, catch these people." Sun Changping felt chills all over his body, so he pulled the man away and walked into the house. Sure enough, Jiang Susu was lying on the bed with a confused expression. The clothes were torn in several places. Hands were tied behind his back. "Susu." Sun Changping's eyes turned red when he saw the guide on Jiang Susu's chin. "When I looked at the wine glass next to me, I didn't know what was going on." He took off his coat and put it on Jiang Susu, then lifted her up horizontally. "Miss." He Hua saw Jiang Susu being carried out by Sun Changping, and her eyes could not help but feel distressed. She followed Sun Changping and walked out. As for those three people, they were also detained by Lao Yang and his men. "It's you again." Seeing an acquaintance, Sidhu Dankai waved his hand, and he seemed a bit familiar. Lao Yang looked around, stepped forward and said, "Miss, could you please come with us and testify against them?" "Sure." Sidhu Dankai also didn't expect that his casual help would be related to the Sun family. She went back to the room, picked up her things, and left with Lao Yang. Sun Changping held Jiang Susu and walked back, but along the way, Jiang Susu's face became redder and redder. A soft moan also escaped from his mouth. Aware that Jiang Susu might have been drugged, Sun Changping walked faster. The lotus flowers also started to run. Finally arrived at Sun Mansion. The doctor rushed over and gave Jiang Susu the medicine. Fortunately, it is not something that cannot be cured by any medicine. He Hua took care of Jiang Susu in the house. Sun Changping learned that Jiang Susu's condition had stabilized, and then turned around and left. When they arrived at the main hall, the three people were kneeling on the ground. The fat man with big ears was shaking non-stop. When he was pressed in, he had already seen the plaque on the door. "This is the Sun Mansion." Didn't it mean that Jiang Susu didn't have any relatives? "How come you are related to the Sun family?" When Sun Changping saw the man, his expression became terrifyingly gloomy. "Step forward and kick him unceremoniously." It only kicked the person away a few meters. The man didn't dare to cry out, he collapsed on the ground and gasped, "I don't know that Miss Susu is from the Sun family. Please spare me, General." The other two boys also kowtowed and begged for mercy. For a time, only a few people crying and begging could be heard in the main hall. Sun Changping's low and cold voice sounded, "Send the person to the Ministry of Punishment and deal with him as you should." The man shuddered and moved away. There was a foul smell in the main hall. The guards of the Sun family stepped forward, gagged a few people, and carried them out. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 195. Chapter 195, Feeling on Pins and Needles. Sulayun had just returned to Kahwazayazu when he heard the announcement. "Miss, the Marquis is here." Sulayun raised his eyebrows and smiled, feeling happy. Since he doesn't go to the Three Treasures Hall for anything, Suchanking's visit must have a purpose. "Please come in." Suchangqing stepped into the house and glanced at the unique decorations around her. Her face was a bit ugly. He could see that many things in this room were Sun Gro's dowry. Sun Gro was reluctant to take it out on weekdays, but now she focused all her attention on Kahwazayazu. Why does father have time to come to his daughter at this time? Sulayun was sitting in his seat and had no intention of getting up to greet him. Suchangqing didn't know what he was thinking, but he didn't blame him. He coughed and found a place to sit down. There were many servants standing in the room. He glanced at them and said, "You all should go down first." But no one moved. Sulayun pretended to be puzzled and said, "Does father have anything to tell his daughter in private?" "It's nothing special." Seeing that no one listened to him, Suchanking's face stiffened, but he did not have an attack. Instead, he said patiently, "Your mother has been at Sun Mansion for some time, why hasn't she come back yet?" "The mother wants to stay a few more days, but it's hard to persuade the daughter. If the father is anxious, he can go to Sun Mansion to pick up the mother." Sulayun returned. Then he asked, "Is there anything else?" The corner of Suchanking's mouth twitched. After all, she couldn't hold back her anger. She stood up and said, "It's okay. All the miscellaneous things in your house have been put away. A girl's house has so many things outside. People would think they were seeing it. Our Su family is nouveau riche." After saying that, Suchangqing flicked his sleeves and left. From the time he sat down to the time he stood up, he probably hadn't even warmed up his chair yet. Sulayun blinked, feeling a little strange. From what Suchangqing said, it seemed that he wanted his mother to come back as soon as possible. "It seems like you don't care much about Suya anymore?" The next day, the news of the victory spread back to the capital. There was also a lot of compliments in the court. After the Morning Dynasty, Lu Hong walked out and was stopped by someone. "Master Lu, congratulations. Why are you so happy?" Lu Hong arrived indifferently. The person who came to chat was stunned and replied hesitantly, "This Suya is your nephew. He won the battle without any accident. Aren't you happy?" "Yeah." Lu Hong glanced at him and left without saying another word. The man scratched his head and was a little confused. Did Lu Hong really not seem happy at all? Suchangqing had just ordered his servants to prepare breakfast when he heard footsteps. Came back. Lu Hong did not respond and walked straight inside. Suchangqing was stunned and quickly followed. "What's wrong?" "It's time to eat, aren't you hungry?" Lu Hong walked quickly and took off his court clothes as soon as he entered the house. Something happened in the morning. Suya won the battle, and the news has come back now. Suchangqing was startled. "Didn't you say you were missing? The disappearances are all fake and said to be a ruse." Lu Hong's face was solemn. He thought that Suya would definitely die this time, but he didn't expect that the other party not only survived, but also won the battle. Suchangqing didn't know what Lu Hong was thinking. If you're not dead, you're not dead. As long as Suya's surname is Su, he will be inseparable from the Su family. Although it was a pity, Suchangqing only regretted it for a moment and didn't think about it again. "Hurry up and change your clothes and go out to eat." After saying that, Suchangqing went out. The three children have also taken their seats at the dinner table. Seeing her mother coming, Lu Shuiying pouted and said, "Mom, Daddy hasn't come back yet? I'm starving to death." Ever since she moved into her new home, Su Changjing has made a rule. Breakfast must be eaten by the whole family together. Lu Shuiying didn't see Lu Hong and thought she hadn't returned from the morning meeting. "I'm back and changing my clothes. If you're hungry, eat first," Su Changjing said as she took a bite of food to Lu Shuiying. Lu Shuiying exclaimed. Normally, her father would eat first after breakfast, so why did he change his clothes first today? Just as he was thinking about it, Lu Hong had already walked over. "I'm going out for a while, Dad." Lu Hong had already walked away before Lu Shuiying's voice came out. Su Changjing stared at Lu Hong's back and frowned. "What's going on? Let's eat." She couldn't figure it out either, so she didn't embarrass herself. The news that Su Yi returned from missing and won a battle quickly spread. Even more people came to the door of the Su family and the Sun family to inquire about the news. But what is surprising is that both sides declined to see guests. Su Leun planned to go to Lin Mansion. As soon as he arrived at the door, he looked up and saw Su Wan'er. She knew that the other party was coming back, but she hadn't seen him in the past few days. "Sister Yuner wants to go out too." Su Wan'er saw Su Leun and greeted her as usual. Su Leun responded calmly. Although the two did not say it explicitly, they obviously knew it. Although Su Wan'er didn't know how Su Leun left the Li family villa, she already understood that Su Leun was not an easy person to deal with. "Why don't we come together and save a carriage? We are not on our way." Su Leun simply refused. Su Wan'er didn't know what was wrong, so she insisted on going with Su Leun. "It's okay. You can ask the driver to take Sister Yuner there first. I'm not in a hurry." Su Leun stared at Su Wan'er for a while. He didn't know what he thought of, but he didn't refuse again. Getting on the carriage, Su Leun said, "Go to Sun Mansion." Su Wan'er frowned and said in a friendly manner, "It just so happens that I haven't visited my grandpa for a long time." Su Leun did not respond. Su Wan'er was not angry, and the carriage fell into silence. Soon we arrived at Sun Mansion. Seeing Su Leun and Su Wan'er coming together, Lao Yang was stunned for a moment. "Little miss, the miss is at Miss Susu's side? Then I'll go there." Su Leun nodded and walked towards the guest room. Su Wan'er wanted to say something to Lao Yang, but as soon as she opened her mouth, she heard Lao Yang ask, "Miss Su, who do you want to see?" Her face stiffened slightly. Even if she knew that the result of coming to the Sun Mansion would not be good, she never expected that Lao Yang would be so direct. She is still the nominal eldest daughter of the Su family. "I'm here to see my mother," Lao Yang said. "Then please go to the main hall and wait for a while." She did not treat Su Wan'er as a young lady at all, but rather as if she was greeting a guest who came to her door. Su Wan'er's face turned even more ugly. "I'll just go there with Sister Yuner. It's not very convenient for Miss Su. Miss Su should go to the main hall first." Lao Yang didn't care and pointed in the direction of the main hall. Su Wan'er had no choice but to follow Lao Yang with her lips pursed. When she arrived at the main hall, the servants brought tea and snacks, making it clear that she was treated as a guest. "Miss Su, please wait a moment, I'll go talk to the lady." Su Wan'er forced a smile, and the servant's strange eyes fell on her, making her feel on pins and needles. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 196. Chapter 196, Door to Door. In the guest room. Jiang Susu has been silent since she woke up. Only the lotus flowers were so anxious that they almost cried. "Miss, don't be like this. Speak and don't scare me." Sun Jiaro frowned when she saw Jiang Susu's dull expression. Miss Susu, are you feeling uncomfortable somewhere? Do you want the doctor to take a look at you again? Sun Gro asked softly. Sun Changping stood outside the house, looking inside anxiously. Great uncle. Suleun saw Sun Changping at a glance, walked up and looked into the house. The atmosphere in the room was very gloomy. Jiang Susu remained silent, and she had not even used her breakfast. Girl Susu, even if you don't want to talk, don't torture yourself, eat something first, right? Sun Gro asked again. Sun Changping couldn't bear it any longer and raised his legs to go into the house. But as soon as he took a step forward, Jiang Susu stepped back, her back pressed against the wall, as if she was resisting. Brother, you go out first. Sun Gro glanced at Sun Changping helplessly. There was no other way, so Sun Changping had no choice but to step out again. He Hua came to him early in the morning, saying that Jiang Susu had woken up, but when he entered the house, Jiang Susu's expression suddenly changed drastically, and she wished she was far away from him. Sun Changping didn't know what he had done and why he suddenly refused to meet him. Suleun saw some clues and said softly, Miss Susu, I'm coming in. Then he walked into the room and slowly walked to the bed. Probably Sun Changping left the room, and Jiang Susu slowly relaxed. Suleun stood beside the bed. Miss Susu, I am Leun. Jiang Susu did not respond, but her eyes moved, apparently hearing it. Do you remember what happened yesterday? Jiang Susu's eyes blinked rapidly, and her body began to tremble slightly. Don't be afraid, nothing happened yesterday. You were in a coma, and it was my uncle who brought you back. Yes, Miss, General Sun saved you. Outside the house, Sun Changping coughed lightly. It was Miss Sidu who saved Susu. It was just a coincidence on my part. Miss Sidu? Suleun couldn't stop thinking about who this girl Sidu was. Seeing Jiang Susu's reaction, he continued, so many of us can testify. Miss Susu, you can feel it yourself, right? Nothing really happened yesterday. Jiang Susu's blinking slowed down and her mouth moved, as if she wanted to say something. Several people looked at her worriedly. I really haven't been. The rest of the words were choked in my throat. Tears flowed down the corners of Jiang Susu's eyes, and Hehua also started crying. Miss, it's okay, everything's okay. The master and servant hugged each other and cried. Seeing Jiang Susu speak, several people also breathed a sigh of relief. But Sun Changping still didn't dare to come in. He stood outside the house for a while, then turned and left. Suleun took Sun Gro out of the house. Mom, when do you plan to return to Su Mansion? I'm not in a hurry to go back. Sun Gro paused and looked at Suleun's expression. Has anyone asked about me? Father asked you yesterday and seemed to want you to go back. This is strange. Sun Gro felt a little weird. Just before Sun Gro could figure it out, Lao Yang ran over and said, Miss, my uncle is here. Sun Gro and Suleun looked at each other with surprise. In the main hall, Su Changqing saw Su Weiner, paused, and then stepped forward calmly. Why are you here at Sun Mansion? Go back to my father, I'll come and see my mother. The conversation between the two people was alienated but also a little strangely close. Su Changqing's attitude towards Su Weiner was somewhat complicated. When he first found out that she was not his biological daughter and that he had raised her for so many years, Su Changqing was annoyed and bored. If Mrs. Su hadn't been protecting Su Weiner, Su Changqing would have asked someone to send Su Weiner back to Jingzhou early in the morning. But now that he knew that Su Weiner had a relationship with King Yu, and that the Su family and King Yu might be able to get married, Su Changqing's attitude changed. After all these years of raising her, Su Weiner's biological parents cannot be taken advantage of. Su Weiner knew it well, and when facing Su Changqing, she was no longer as worried as in the past, fearing that he would send her away. Sun Jiaro and Suleun entered the main hall. Roar. Su Changqing saw Sun Jiaro and stood up and walked over after a while. The eyes are extremely gentle. Sun Jiaro was in a daze for Su Changqing like this. She hadn't seen him for many years. Why are you here, Mr. Ho? Sun Jiaro avoided Su Changqing and walked aside. Facing Sun Jiaro's indifference, Su Changqing didn't care at all. Roer, you've been here for several days, is it time to go home? Is there anything in the Su mansion that I need to deal with? Sun Jiaro asked back. Su Changqing was stunned. He didn't expect Sun Jiaro to ask such a question. He thought that since he had come to Sun's house on his own initiative, Sun Jiaro should have walked down the steps. My mother-in-law is in charge of the house, so there is nothing I need to worry about. My father is not in good health, so I want to stay a few more days to fulfill my filial piety. What do you think, Lord Marquis? Sun Jiaro looked at Su Changqing with a smile. Su Changqing could not find any problem with the reason for staying. Until now, Mrs. Su is the housekeeper of the Su mansion, so Sun Jiaro really has no need to go back. But if Sun Jiaro doesn't go back? Su Changqing pursed her lips and said the next moment, my mother has been suffering from cold these days. I thought it would be better for Roer to go back and help her, right? These words made Sun Jiaro's eyes flash. Does the Marquis mean that I should go back and take care of the house? My mother is also getting old and it's really time to take a good rest. Su Changqing nodded. Suleun looked surprised. In order to let her mother go back, Su Changqing actually offered to hand over the housekeeper's rights to her mother. It seems that the news that Su Ye won the battle made him a little panicked. Thinking of this, Suleun coughed lightly and said, Mom, didn't you tell your second aunt that you would take her and Xiaoxian for a nice stroll? I forgot about it. Sun Jiaro was stunned for a moment and quickly reacted. Master Ho, my second sister-in-law has just come back. I will go back in a few days. Knowing that he would not be able to pick up Sun Jiaro today, Su Changqing's expression was not very good, but he did not say anything. Since the second sister-in-law is back, I will pick you up Roer in a few days. After saying that, Su Changqing turned and left. The back looks a bit depressing. Su Weiner looked at Sun Jiaro and then at Suleun. She found that their attitudes towards Su Changqing were a little strange. Sister Weiner turns out to be still here, I thought you were gone. Suleun seemed confused as if he had just seen Su Weiner. Hearing these words, Su Weiner's mouth curved slightly, but she still said warmly, Mom, let me see you. Sun Jiaro really just saw Su Weiner and said in surprise, aren't you supposed to be at Longjio Temple? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 197. Chapter 197, The Place You Shouldn't Be. Sun Jiaro is not in Su mansion, so she really doesn't know that Su Weiner has returned. Suleun would not specifically mention this matter in her ears. It was not an important matter anyway. Mom, you have been away from home these days. My grandmother is not in good health, so I asked my daughter to go back and take care of her. Then you can take good care of your grandma. Sun Jiaro has nothing to say to Su Weiner, not to mention that this is the Sun mansion. To put it bluntly, Sun Jiaro didn't really want to see Su Weiner in the Sun mansion. It's nothing, just go back. This is not the place you should be. The meaning of the sentence is very obvious. The smile on Su Weiner's face could no longer be maintained. Her hands hidden under her sleeves had already pinched red marks on their palms. Looking at Sun Jiaro and Suleun for a long time, Su Weiner said with a trembling voice, Mom, then Weiner, leave first. Ms. Su, please come this way. Lao Yang stepped forward, as if seeing off a guest. Watching Su Weiner leave, Sun Jiaro sighed softly, your grandmother was very kind to her. Even though she was not related by blood, she still cared about her like this. This sentence made Suleun slightly startled. It's not that she hasn't thought about this problem, but in all her past and present lives, she hasn't figured it out. Why does Madame Su treat Suwainer so well? Suleun couldn't help but think of the Li family and his wife. The faces of the two people flashed before her eyes one by one. On the day she first returned to Beijing, she ridiculed Suwainer for looking similar to the Li family, but now that she thought about it, they were not that similar. Suleun was shocked. Could it be that there was another problem with Suwainer's identity? Once this speculation surfaced, it was a bit hard to suppress. Before going to Lin Mansion, Suleun first went to Yulo and asked to investigate Suwainer's affairs. Then he went to Lin Mansion. 100 birds paying attention to the phoenix has been completed, and Suleun will finish it today. I thought you wouldn't come today. Lu Qin smiled when he saw Suleun coming in. Can I not come to such an important moment? The two men stepped forward and took the embroidered cloth off the shelf. Seal the edges around and put it back into the rack. The patterns on the embroidered cloth are so lifelike that people can't bear to look away. As soon as Mrs. Lin came in, she faced this painting of hundreds of birds facing the phoenix, and she was fascinated by it for a while. After Lu Qin and Suleun shouted a few times, Mrs. Lin came back to her senses. This picture of hundreds of birds paying homage to the phoenix is really beyond my expectation. Even though Mrs. Lin trusted the two of them, she never expected that this embroidery would be completed so well. She asked someone to get a cloth and cover the screen to protect it from moisture. Looks like you can take a good rest. Mrs. Lin joked. She originally thought that it would be good to finish it before the Queen Mother's birthday banquet, but now it is nearly half a month ahead of schedule, which is beyond her imagination. However, Suleun and Lu Qin are only responsible for this embroidery, so after finishing their work, they can really take a good rest. It's Mrs. Lin who has made all the preparations, otherwise we wouldn't have finished it so quickly. Lu Qin returned. Mrs. Lin covered her mouth and smiled, just because you are sweet, I will send you home some reward later, and I will have someone pay you more. Hearing this, Lu Qin's expression changed slightly and his voice became a little lower. Mrs. Lin, have you given me the reward? Not yet, what's wrong? Mrs. Lin also smiled. Suleun also looked at Lu Qin and frowned. Mrs. Lin, I would like to ask you to save the reward for me temporarily. Mrs. Lin stared at Lu Qin for a while, without asking why, but said, okay, then I will keep it for you first, don't forget it. Mrs. Lin did not ask further questions, and Lu Qin breathed a sigh of relief. Suleun and Lu Qin left Lin Mansion together, and they were heading back the same way. Lian Xian and Quiliu followed behind the two of them. You can often hear discussions on the street, all talking about the war in the northwest. Little General Su is really awesome, he deserves to be the grandson of General Sun. That's not true. Let me tell you, Suho is very lucky. He married the daughter of General Sun and got such a child who can fight. He won't have to worry about anything in the future. But why did I hear that Mrs. Su has returned to her parents' home these days, and someone saw Suho going to Sun's house early this morning, but he left alone. Lu Qin glanced at Suleun beside him. It was clear that the discussion was about the Su family, but Suleun seemed to be fine. How? Suleun had a look of doubt on his face. Lu Qin wanted to ask, but still shook his head, nothing. As he was walking forward, Lu Qin paused. Suleun followed her gaze and saw Lu He standing in front of a stall, not knowing what he was saying. The stall owner was blocked by the Liuhe River and could not be seen. But the next second, Lu He said something, and the stall owner's figure flashed and his face was revealed. Suleun recognized the man. It is Qinqiu's husband Zhou Mingsheng. The last time she went to Qinqiu's house, she also saw Lu He and Zhou Mingsheng. Zhou Mingsheng. Lu Qin also exclaimed, obviously knowing the other party. Then her face darkened, she walked forward quickly, and within a moment she was standing in front of the two of them. Lu He, are you causing trouble for him again? Sister, what you said is wrong. I have business to discuss with him, are you right? Zhou Mingsheng. Lu He didn't panic when he saw Lu Qin, and even put his arm on Zhou Mingsheng's shoulder pretending to be close. When Sulayun came over, he saw the boredom in Zhou Mingsheng's eyes, but he did not push Lu He away. Msu is here too. Lu He met Sulayun's appraising eyes, let go of his hand, and bowed respectfully. Zhou Mingsheng, tell me honestly, is he here to cause trouble for you? Lu Qin didn't believe Lu He's words and asked. Zhou Mingsheng lowered his head and shook his head slowly. Look, he said there was no more. Lu He was sure that Zhou Mingsheng did not dare to say anything, and there was a smile in his cold eyes. Lu Qin wanted to say something else, but her sleeve was pulled by Sulayun. She turned her head and looked, and Sulayun shook his head slightly. It's almost spring if you're so free, go back and read more. After saying this, Lu Qin took Sulayun and turned around to leave. Lu Qin didn't let go until he had walked out for a long distance. What happened between Lu He and Zhou Mingsheng? Li Yun, do you also know Zhou Mingsheng? The anger on Lu Qin's face had not dissipated, but when he heard the familiarity in Sulayun's words, he subconsciously asked. I have met Mrs. Zhou several times. Although he still had doubts, Lu Qin did not ask Sulayun how he met Qinqiu. Instead, he sighed and said, Zhou Mingsheng is Lu He's teacher. Zhou Mingsheng received the recommendation, and after coming to the capital with Qinqiu, he went to Kaiming Academy to teach. Most of the students in Kaiming Academy are the sons of businessmen. Although they do not have much power, they are rich enough, so they look down on Zhou Mingsheng, a master from the village. I always feel that asking Zhou Mingsheng to teach me is underestimating them. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 198. Chapter 198 We have children. Lu He is the leader among those people, but he has always been good at pretending. At the beginning, Zhou Mingsheng was helped by Lu He several times, so that Zhou Mingsheng thought Lu He was a good person. But several times later, Zhou Mingsheng was not stupid, and gradually realized that something was wrong with Lu He. He even asked Lu He for theory and other masters in the academy for help. But to no avail. Until the last time, I don't know what happened, Zhou Mingsheng actually had a dispute with Lu He and others in the academy in front of the dean, and even got involved. Zhou Mingsheng made the first move, and coupled with the smear campaign by several people in Liuhe, Zhou Mingsheng was naturally fired. Sulayun recalled the scene when he met Qinqiu for the second time. Zhou Mingsheng came back injured at that time, and he was probably fired that day. I only learned about this recently. I overheard a few of them chatting at the Lu family. Lu Qin showed a wry smile, then I asked about Zhou Mingsheng's address from the academy and brought an apology, only to find out that because Zhou Mingsheng was fired, he can only set up a stall and make a living by painting and writing. Although it was Lu He who did it, as Lu He's sister, she felt really bad about it. It's just that apart from giving some money as compensation, she can't help with anything else. Since Zhou Mingsheng is no longer at Kaiming Academy, why is Lu He looking for him? Sulayun thought for a moment and asked. Lu Qin was also confused. Li Yun, why did you stop me from asking just now? Zhou Mingsheng is unwilling to answer. There must be some questions. Instead of asking him, you might as well ask someone else. Someone else? Lu Qin frowned and quickly reacted. Are you talking about Qinqiu? As Zhou Mingsheng's pillow, maybe Qinqiu can know something. Sulayun nodded, but I won't go with you. I can't interfere in this matter. Lu Qin understood that Sulayun only had a few acquaintances with Qinqiu, so it was not good to come to ask about such things rashly. But as Lu He's sister, It doesn't matter if she asks a few questions. The two of them separated at the intersection. After having lunch at Sun's house, Suleun took a short rest and then followed Sun Gro, Qin Zian, and Sun Yuxuan out. In the carriage, Sun Yuxuan looked curiously at the street outside. From time to time, he showed a look of surprise. "Sister, what is that?" Sun Yuxuan tugged on Suleun's sleeve and pointed outside the carriage. "I saw an old man carrying a straw target with a lot of candied haws on it. A child came to his parents to get some copper coins, and he happily rushed forward. That's candied haws, my sister will buy it for you later." Suleun rubbed the top of Sun Yuxuan's hair. Qin Zian couldn't help but sigh when she saw this scene. This child was curious about everything on the way back. The words were not complaints, but guilt. Sun Gro looked at her and said with a smile, "Xiaoxian has been in the northwest for so many years, so it's reasonable to be curious. Yuner is also free on weekdays, so I asked her to take Xiaoxian out for more walks." When Qin Zian heard this, she thought of something and leaned into Sun Gro's ear. "Now that Leun is back, what about the Li family's marriage? This marriage belongs to Suleun, so we can't make it easier for Suwainer, right?" Sun Gro shook her head. "Yuner's marriage depends on her own ideas." Qin Zian heard the implication of Sun Gro's words. "It's okay, after all, the two children have grown up together since childhood, and if Ruo Yuner really interferes, it will make things worse." The carriage stopped in front of the cloth village. Suleun pulled Sun Yuxuan out of the carriage first and walked in the direction of the candied haws. "Old man, please bring me a bunch of candied haws." The old man moved quickly and took a string from the straw target and handed it to Suleun. Liangzin stepped forward and gave the copper coins. Taking the candied haws from Suleun, Sun Yuxuan took a bite and said vaguely, "Sister, aren't you going to eat it?" "My sister doesn't eat." Suleun took Sun Yuxuan's free hand and walked towards Buzwang. Before he stepped into the cloth village, a voice sounded from behind him. "Suleun, why haven't we seen each other for a few days? Why do you even have a child?" Suleun paused, and the corner of his mouth twitched uncontrollably. Turning around, I saw a woman in red. Who else could she be if she wasn't Princess Yongping? "Princess, if you think about it with your brain, you will know that this is not my child." Of course Princess Yongping knew that she had made a big mistake, but just when she saw Suleun, she subconsciously wanted to say something. Who would have thought that such words would come out without thinking? She bit her lower lip and looked across Sun Yuxuan's face, as if she had discovered something. "This looks quite similar to you. It's not a big deal if I admit I'm wrong. As long as the princess is happy." Sueli gave a fake smile. Since their first meeting, Princess Yongping's appearance has left her speechless every time. She was a little suspicious. Is Princess Yongping, who grew up in the palace, really stupid, or is she pretending to be stupid? Princess Yongping frowned. "Suleun, are you trying to deal with this princess?" The princess misunderstood. Suleun pulled Xiaoxian behind him without leaving a trace. "It's just that the daughter's mother and second aunt are inside, so it's not convenient for the daughter to chat with the princess." "You want to chat with me, but I'm not happy about it." Princess Yongping snorted softly and walked towards the cloth village. Suleun and Sun Yuxuan looked at each other, and the latter said softly, "Sister, does this princess dislike me?" "Xiaoxian, don't get me wrong, the princess doesn't like my sister." Suleun joked and took Sun Yuxuan in. Sun Gro and Qin Zian were still selecting fabrics. When they saw the two coming, Qin Zian moved the fabric in her hand to Sun Yuxuan. "Xiaoxian, which of these colors do you like?" Sun Yuxuan was still chewing candied haws in his mouth, and his eyes passed over several pieces of cloth. Then he pointed with his little hand and chose a white color. "Isn't this color good looking?" Qin Zian actually preferred another color, so she subconsciously picked up the fabric and asked. Sun Yuxuan swallowed the candied haws in his mouth, shook his head and said, "Mom, Xiaoxian wants to wear this color, it's clean and good looking." As he spoke, he carefully reached out his hand and touched the fabric. The comfortable touch made him smile. "Obviously, I like this material very much." The child made his choice, and Qin Zian naturally would not refuse, so he asked the shopkeeper to take the cloth. Sulayun also took a fancy to a material. Just as he was about to get his hands on it, he stretched out a hand from his side. "Shopkeeper, I want this material." Princess Yongping glanced at Sulayun, as if she was proud of taking what she wanted. The shopkeeper was a little embarrassed and looked at Sulayun. "Give it to the princess," Sulayun said and retracted his hand. It was just a piece of material, so there was no need for her to fight with him. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 199. Chapter 199. More difficult to coax than a child. Sulayun turned his head to look at other fabrics, but as soon as he put his hand on it, the voice of Princess Yongping sounded behind him. "I want this too." The finger pointed at the cloth under Sulayun's hand. Sulayun noticed Princess Yongping's thoughts. It seemed that the other party was not interested in this material, but was deliberately trying to compete with her. This little girl's temperament is definitely annoying to say the least. What's more, if we really talk about it, the grudge between Sulayun and Princess Yongping is due to Xiao Shenjiao. It doesn't matter if it happens once or twice. If it continues like this, Sulayun is not without a temper. She thought about it for a while, but did not get angry. Instead, she said, "The princess bought these fabrics to sew clothes for some young master. The materials that Sulayun likes are all dark in color and don't have many patterns, making them more suitable for men's clothes." Hearing her question, Princess Yongping snorted, "Is there anyone in the capital who is worthy of having clothes sewn by my own hands? Where is His Highness King Jin?" As soon as the word King of Jin came out of his mouth, Princess Yongping's expression changed. She stared at Sulayun for a long time and said disdainfully, "I advise some people not to think about it." "Princess, please don't get me wrong," Sulayun smiled, "I heard that His Highness the King of Jin captured the second Turkic prince. I think it won't be long before they can triumph. If the princess can present a piece of clothing sewn by herself, I think His Highness Prince Jin will be very happy to come." "You mean to ask me to do manual work?" "Princess, don't you want to see His Highness Prince Jin wearing the clothes you made?" Sulayun's words obviously moved Princess Yongping. "She really hasn't tried it yet." Princess Yongping shook her head and looked at Sulayun warily, "Are you so kind as to remind me of this?" She did not forget that King Jin's attitude towards Sulayun was very different. Actually, the daughter of the people has never had the opportunity to explain to the princess that there is no relationship between the daughter of the people and His Highness Prince Jin. It is just because the brother is the companion of His Highness the Prince of Jin, so His Highness will pay a little attention to the daughter of the people. Sulayun spoke humbly, sincerely, and reasonably, which made Princess Yongping less suspicious for a while. She looked at Sulayun up and down, and said after a while, "Then King Jin saved you, it's not a lie, right?" The Minu has explained this matter before. The Minu thought that even if it was not the Minu who fell into the water at that time, His Highness Prince Jin would come to the rescue. On this point, the princess has known His Highness Jin for many years and should be clearer than the Minu. Sulayun's words brought the relationship between Princess Yongping and the King of Jin closer. Such simple words were very useful to Princess Yongping. After all, she and Prince Jin were childhood sweethearts. You are right. In this case, the princess will forgive you for what happened before." Princess Yongping cleared her throat and glanced at Sulayun, as for what you said about sewing clothes, I will think about it. After saying that, she looked at the cloth that the shopkeeper had packed and said, I paid the money. You can give her the things. Princess Yongping raised her chin and signaled the shopkeeper to give the cloth to Suleun. These cloths are not worthy of the king of Jin. She muttered and turned to leave. Suleun breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Princess Yongping leaving. Princess Yongping was even more difficult to coax than a child. Sun Gro had been paying attention to the movement before, and when she saw this, she hurriedly stepped forward. Yunur, between you and Princess Yongping, I have forgotten that Princess Yongping has feelings for Prince Jin. It seems that His Highness Prince Jin is not suitable for Yun. You. Mom, where did you think you were going? Suleun couldn't laugh or cry. Did her mother just think of this? Zhou Mingshen's family. Lu Qin lightly knocked on the wooden door, and footsteps sounded inside. Qin Xiu opened the door and was stunned for a moment when he saw it was her. Miss Lu, why are you here? Of course she remembered Lu Qin, but when she saw Lu Qin, she couldn't help but think of her husband's dismissal from the academy, and she didn't know how to deal with it for a while. Mrs. Zhou, I know you may not want to see me, but with all due respect, there are some things about your husband and my brother that I want to ask you. Liu he came to see my husband. Qin Xiu was stunned. After learning about the grievances between Lu He and her husband, she told her husband again and again, and he also said that Lu He would not come to him again. But now hearing what Lu Qin said, Qin Xiu realized that Zhou Mingsheng had deceived her. She opened the door and said, Miss Lu, come in and tell me if you have anything to say. After entering the house, Qin Xiu wanted to pour tea for Lu Qin, but Lu Qin stopped him. I'll do it myself, Mrs. Zhou. Sit down and be careful of the child. Lu Qin glanced at Qin Xiu's belly. She was a little worried. She didn't know if it was a good thing for her to talk about this matter today. But if you delay, it will be too late to tell you something happens. Miss Lu, what happened to my husband and Lu He? Qin Xiu was also anxious. When he heard Lu Qin's words, he quickly wiped his hands and asked. Lu Qin hesitated for a moment and told Qin Xiu what happened before, but did not mention Suleun. He told me Mingsheng that Liu He didn't come to see him again. Qin Xiu's face was full of embarrassment. Seeing her look like this, Lu Qin realized that Qin Xiu might not know about this either. Mrs. Zhou, let me be frank. I don't think anything good will happen if Lu He comes to your husband-in-law. I know my brother's temperament very well, and I'm worried that he wants your husband-in-law to do something. And that incident, it must be something that even your husband-in-law would not dare to tell you. But, what can happen? Qin Xiu looked at the clothes in the yard. Mingsheng is not attending classes at Kaiming Academy now, and your Lu family is not short of money. What exactly does Lu He want to do with my husband? Lu Qin said with a heavy tone, that's why I came to you. If I asked Lu He wouldn't tell me. But you are different. Maybe you can ask something from Zhou Mingsheng. The room is a little dull. Qin Xiu pursed her lips and thought for a long time, what should I do if I ask? If you can persuade your husband. Lu Qin thought for a while and added, if you find it difficult to handle, you can come to the Lu family to find me. I understand, Miss Lu, I will try to ask. Lu Qin nodded, stood up and left without staying any longer. Qin Xiu sent Lu Qin away and turned to look at the yard, feeling a little confused for a moment. She sat down on the small stool and continued washing clothes. As the night grew darker, Zhou Mingsheng also closed his stall and came back. As soon as he entered the door, he smelled the aroma wafting from the kitchen. Zhou Mingsheng rubbed his cheeks and raised a smile, Madam, I'm back. But after waiting for a long time, Qin Xiu didn't come out as usual, and there wasn't even the slightest sound. Zhou Mingsheng felt nervous and quickly entered the house. They saw Qin Xiu sitting at the table. There were cooked meals on the table, But Qin Shiu's face was indeed silent. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 200. Chapter 200 Making Do. MRS. Qin Shiu raised her eyes to look at him, pointed to a seat aside, and motioned for him to sit down. Zhou Mingsheng has not seen Qin Shiu like this for an unknown amount of time. The last time seemed to be before coming to the capital. He sat down nervously. Before my even touched the stool, I heard a sound being slapped on the table. Zhou Mingsheng trembled and quickly stood up again. Madam, don't be so angry with yourself. If I do anything wrong, just scold me. I asked you to sit down. Qin Shiu breathed out from her nose, and Zhou Mingsheng had no choice but to sit down tremblingly. But while sitting, he paid attention to Qin Shiu's reaction. Fortunately, Qin Shiu didn't scare him again this time. After Zhou Mingsheng sat down, he reached out to lift Qin Shiu's hand, worried that she might have hurt him just now. Madam, does your hand hurt? You still care about my hand pain? Let me ask you, have you still had any contact with Lu He? Qin Shiu looked at Zhou Mingsheng, and the latter's eyes flickered. Since Qin Shiu couldn't see Zhou Mingsheng's reaction since he was sleeping next to her, he couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. She believed in Zhou Mingsheng too much before and didn't notice it. Now that he was reminded, Qin Shiu didn't know why Zhou Mingsheng had indeed lied to him. Madam, this matter. Zhou Mingsheng, do you still remember what you promised me when we got married? Zhou Mingsheng was stunned. How could he forget? The first time he met Qin Shiu was at the funeral of Qin Shiu's parents. Uncle Qin Shiu paid someone to go to mourning. He went there to earn some money for medicine for his seriously ill mother. After the funeral, Zhou Mingsheng also heard a lot about Qin Shiu's parents. It is said that Qin Shiu's parents encountered a natural disaster on their way back and both died. Uncle Qin Shiu took Qin Shiu in, but in fact he wanted to get the money left by Qin Shiu's parents. At the funeral, Qin Shiu did not cry from beginning to end. The ones crying are all people hired by Uncle Qin Shiu with money, such as Zhou Mingsheng. Worried that he wouldn't be able to cry, Zhou Mingsheng specially prepared chili pepper water and wiped some on his eyes once the tears disappeared. The effect is pretty good. Until the funeral was over, Zhou Mingsheng received his reward from Uncle Qin Shiu. A full 50 copper coins. He counted the coins again and again before carefully putting the coins away. Looking up, he saw Qin Shiu standing not far away. The scene where he was counting money just now was watched by everyone who thought about it. Are you short of money? Qin Shiu's hoarse voice sounded. Zhou Mingsheng stared at Qin Shiu's red and swollen eyes for a long time, and suddenly realized that it wasn't that Qin Shiu wasn't crying, but that she seemed to have cried enough. What's the meaning? Zhou Mingsheng covered the copper coin on his chest and looked at Qin Shiu warily. It's not that he thinks Qin Shiu will come up to grab it, but it's just a habit. This money is his mother's life-saving money, so he doesn't dare to be careless. Why else are you crying for someone who has nothing to do with you? Qin Shiu raised her eyes and looked not far away, where her parents were buried. Even I, the daughter, didn't cry, but you cried very vigorously. Zhou Mingsheng was speechless for a moment, but if he could make money, why should he care so much? Just as he was about to explain something to Qin Shiu, a familiar aunt ran over and said, Mingsheng, please go back and take a look. Your mother fainted again. Zhou Mingsheng's face changed drastically and he hurriedly ran towards home. When I arrived, the doctor was already treating my mother. He took out the copper coins from his arms and gave them to the doctor. I have money, please save my mother. The doctor had a look of helplessness on his face. I've told you about your mother's illness a long time ago. If it can't be cured, she can only rely on medicine to survive. Just count how many days she can survive. The 50 copper coins were still used to buy medicine. But my mother's health continued to deteriorate day by day. Perhaps knowing that her time was short, Zhou's mother's only wish was to see her son get married before she died. But even if Zhou Mingsheng was willing to marry, no one would marry their daughter to him. Until that day, Qin Qiu stood in front of Zhou Mingsheng again. "I heard that you are getting married. It just so happens that I also want to get married. How about we make do with it?" Zhou Mingsheng agreed in a daze. No matter what Qin Qiu's reason was for marrying him, Zhou Mingsheng was grateful to Qin Qiu. On the wedding day, Zhou Mingsheng swore to Qin Qiu in front of his mother's bed that no matter what happened in his life, he would treat Qin Qiu well and would not let her suffer any injustice. After his mother passed away, he and Qin Qiu depended on each other, and they went from being two strangers to what they are now. It wasn't until the 3-year filial piety period expired and he decided to go to Beijing to take the exam that he knew why Qin Qiu was willing to marry him in the first place. Qin Qiu's uncle wanted to marry Qin Qiu to a small businessman. Qin Qiu was not willing, and her uncle did not force her. He just told Qin Qiu that as long as she married within 7 days, he would not let her marry a small businessman. At that time, Zhou Mingsheng happened to be asking for marriage, so Qin Qiu chose him. Even though she was taking advantage of her, after marrying into the Zhou family, Qin Qiu took good care of Zhou's mother and did her best for Zhou Mingsheng. In order to pay for traveling to Beijing, Qin Qiu also begged his uncle and borrowed a sum of money from him. Uncle Qin Qiu was indeed greedy for money and swallowed the money left by Qin Qiu's parents. But seeing that Qin Qiu had no intention of asking for it, she had a little bit of conscience and lent Qin Qiu money. On the way to the capital, Zhou Mingsheng often thought in his heart that he must get ahead and let Qin Qiu live a good life. What he didn't tell Qin Qiu was that he fell in love with her the first time he saw her. But he was poor and had a seriously ill mother to support, so how could he dare to like her? Even, Zhou Mingsheng's heart almost stopped when he heard that Qin Qiu was willing to marry him. "Madam, I..." Zhou Mingsheng looked into Qin Qiu's eyes, and the guilt in his heart emerged layer by layer. But the next moment, Lu He's words also appeared in his mind. His palms couldn't help but clenched. "Mr. Sir, no matter what happens, you have to speak out so that we can face it together, right?" This sentence completely relieved Zhou Mingsheng, and he told everything about Lu He looking for him. After hearing the reason, Qin Qiu almost jumped up. "Zhou Mingsheng, are you stupid? That's a matter of killing the 9 tribes, Qin Qiu quickly lowered his voice after shouting, "Do you believe what he said? I said you were a nerd before, but I didn't expect you. It's really getting more and more nerdy." Qin Qiu stood up, paced back and forth in the room, and looked at Zhou Mingsheng with a look of disdain. She knew that Zhou Mingsheng had suffered a lot during his more than half a year in the capital. The students at Kaiming Academy looked down on him. In order not to worry her, he had to bear it all by himself and make money to support the family. Qin Qiu stopped, thinking of Lu Qin's words. "Mingsheng, you must not promise Lu He. I will find someone to find a solution for this matter. Anyway, there is still some time before spring, so don't worry." End of this chapter.